Speaker.
Matt Ducey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I was going to call you Tom. I'm sorry.
They say I look like him too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a privilege to take this call for the second reading of the Social Security Amendment Bill number 3, and a privilege to rise and speak to such a necessary bill. For the many listeners and viewers at home, let me set the scene of this very important bill. This bill amends the Social Security Act 1964, and this bill is about consistency, this bill is about fairness, and this bill is about equity. And very similar to the values of this national government, the value of consistency and better public services, the value of fairness and honesty, and the government value of equity and equal opportunity. Mr. Speaker, can I acknowledge the hard work of this bill's sponsor, the Social Development Minister, the Honourable Anne Tolley. She's committed to protecting the vulnerable, and I must say, Mr. Speaker, last Tuesday I attended the State of the Nation report by the Salvation Army, and I went down, and what a great report that was. It's the 8th annual report, and it is called A Mountain That We Can Climb, and yes, it is a big mountain to climb, but what a great start. Let me see. Child poverty, lower. Number of children at risk, lower. Teenage pregnancies, falling. Overall crime, down. Imprisonment rates, down. Criminal recidivism, down. Employment is up. Unemployment is down, and incomes are rising faster than the cost of living. Can I remind the opposition, in their last State of the Nation report in 2008, it said for all their increased spending and expenditure, they did not increase social progress by 1%.
Not by 1%, not even.
The government is clearly working for New Zealand, Mr. Speaker, and the government is focusing on investing in better public services for New Zealanders. So as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Anne Tolley, Minister of Social Development, committed to protecting the vulnerable. She's committed to ensuring their voice is heard in policy and legislation, and she's committed to delivering services that improve lives. So, Mr. Speaker, what is this bill about? Well, it's about closing loopholes. It's about, at the moment, we have some students and beneficiaries who are receiving differing levels of income support. So this national government is amending this bill because we take it responsibly, the serious responsible of managing our country's finances on behalf of taxpayers. So, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't on this Social Services Select Committee at the time, but my understanding is they did have 2 submissions, but the Social Services Select Committee did make recommendations for this bill to be passed. And can I also pay tribute to our Social Services Select Committee Chair, Alfred Naro, my colleagues' collegial approach, my colleagues' firm hand, my colleagues' empathy to the issues of focus in this Select Committee has contributed to a productive committee to date. A Select Committee that is intent on making good law, and a Select Committee that is making a difference. So, Mr. Speaker, what is the background to this bill? Well, very much it's in 2 parts. And the first one around students, the nub of it, we do have some students who are foregoing student allowance, which entitles them an accommodation supplement of higher values. And we were all students once, or most of us, and we know that it's entrepreneurial when you're a student. Young people like pushing boundaries, but at the end of the day, although this is legal or pretty legal or fairly legal, it was not the intended outcome of the Social Security Act. And I must say how proud I am to live in a country with a Social Security Act and social welfare provision. We all know about the welfare provision post-World War II and Bretton Woods, and with the baby boomers, we can't sustain that level of social welfare, but we can provide targeted social welfare support to the vulnerable. And it reminds me, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to travel into Zimbabwe in 2003, and their economy had just collapsed. And pretty much you'd go to a supermarket and in the tellers they were scooping money into rubbish bags. The money was worth nothing. To go out for dinner you had to fill your backpack up full of money to go and buy a meal. And the people were desperate, Mr. Speaker. They were really on edge. They didn't have the social welfare provision we have in New Zealand. And it just goes to show that for the well-being of people you need strong economic management. And this is what the national government is providing.
I'm going to interrupt the member as I interrupted the previous speaker. The member did take about 3 minutes of introduction and then spoke on the bill for about 90 seconds. I'm now going to advise him to get back on to the bill that's before the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, what is the aim of the bill? The aim of the bill is to exclude students who are eligible under the Student Allowances Regulations of 1998 from receiving accommodation supplement. The amendments make it clear students are not eligible for accommodation supplement if they can receive assistance under the Student Allowance Regulations of 1998. And what about the amendment for beneficiaries, Mr. Speaker? Well, what we do know is that for some beneficiaries, they can receive accident compensation payments. Under the Social Security Act, the direct of the AC payments are deducted dollar for dollar from their benefit, and this is very much from ACC payments, but doesn't include accredited employers. And that's very much the argument and the amendment of this Act. So it's closing a current loophole that results in deductions not being equally applied to compensation paid for by ACC or accredited employers, which is not a very good incentive to work, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, in today's environment, we need everyone to work and to get back to them, for them to get back to work. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry for Social Development are currently deducting from both ACC and accredited employers payments, and this bill, which validate for the present and current practice and past practice, The total cost of this loophole is $700,000 per annum, and it retrospectively applied is $3.261 million. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, this bill is about consistency, it's about fairness, and it's about equity. I acknowledge the hard work of the Social Development Minister, Anne Tolley, and the Social Services Select Committee Chair, Alfred Naro. This bill closes loopholes which allows some students and beneficiaries to receive differing levels of income. This bill, Mr. Speaker, will save millions of dollars as our national government takes its responsibility seriously of managing country's finances on behalf of the taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Speaker.
Jane.